But my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is kind of a reminder of how we got where we are today. And I think it's an important reminder. I got a note from a listener pointing out that over the weekend, CBS did a report, Ted Koppel actually narrated it, about the 1979 seizure of the American the American hostages, the American diplomats by a group of Iranian students. And how Abdul Hassan Bani Sadr, who was president of Iran at the time and was a moderate, he was a pro-democracy moderate, was elected on a platform of releasing the hostages. In fact, 97% of all the votes that went for candidates who were in favor of releasing the hostages. So why didn't the hostages get released? I mean, the moderates were on the verge. They had largely taken over Iran. And, you know, the Shah was gone. The Shah had gone just months earlier. And you know, there was this battle basically going on between the moderates and the Ayatollah, who represented the right-wing radicals, the hardcore, the religious fundamentalists who wanted to turn Iran into a theocracy. And the Reagan administration, or the Reagan campaign rather, this was 1979, 1980, and Reagan was running for president. The Reagan campaign reached out to the Ayatollah, not to Bani Sadr, not to the president, but to the Ayatollah and said, you know, let's cut a deal. We'll support you. We'll, you know, help you become the supreme leader of Iran, and in exchange, and we will sell you spare parts for the, particularly for the F-16s or F-15s, I think they were back then, for the aircraft and other weaponry that the Shah bought from the United States. You need the spare parts, you need the ammunition. We will sell you that stuff in exchange for your hanging on to the hostages. Don't let them go. This will destroy Jimmy Carter's chances to get reelected president. He was actually quite popular at the time. And, you know, and Carter had just given this speech in earlier '79 in which he was talking about the energy crisis. You know, he said the energy crisis is real, and he proposed this solar bank. He said we want to have 20% of the nation's energy coming from solar by the year 2000, 26 years ago. And, you know, just laid out all these, you know, programs to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And it would have worked, except that the Ayatollah took Reagan's deal to screw Carter and said, yeah, sure, we'll take your weapons, we'll take your spare parts, and in exchange for that, we'll hang on to the American hostages and make President Carter look bad so that Ronald Reagan can become president. And that's exactly what happened. It was treason. Now, the New York Times has confirmed this. It was 3 years ago, in 2023. The New York Times interviewed Ben Barnes, who was the former lieutenant governor of Texas, who had gone along on the flight to Paris to cut the deal with the Iranians to hang on to the hostages. And he was just like, it was kind of a deathbed confession. I mean, you know, he was an old guy and he wasn't doing well. I think he's since passed away. I could be wrong. But Ben Barnes confirmed this in the front page of the New York Times. And yet there was no mention of this in this CBS special that Ted Koppel did. Well, of course, CBS is now run by Barry Weiss on behalf of right-wing billionaires, you know, the Ellison family. So no surprise that they're not mentioning that the Reagan administration committed treason in order to win the 1980 election and pack the Supreme Court, by the way, I might add. And, you know, which brought us, of course, Citizens United, et cetera, the destruction of American democracy. But anyhow, that's the story. Bani Sadr he fled to the United States in 1981 and published a piece in the Christian Science Monitor in which he writes, after arriving in France in 1981, I told a BBC reporter that I left Iran to expose the symbiotic relationship between Khomeiniism and Reaganism. Ayatollah Khomeini and Ronald Reagan had organized a clandestine negotiation, later known as the October Surprise, which prevented the attempts by myself and then U.S. President Jimmy Carter to free the hostages before the 1980 U.S. presidential election took place. The fact that they were not released tipped the results of the election in favor of Reagan. So Reagan becomes president, and what does he do? He shuts down Carter's solar bank program that was going to have 20% of our electricity be generated by solar by the year 2000. He shuts down Carter's energy-saving programs. He ends any kind of support for green programs. He increases the hundreds of billions of dollars a year in subsidies that we provide to the fossil fuel industry, in exchange for which the fossil fuel industry shoveled millions of dollars into his campaign, into his re-election campaign in 1984, and basically ended up owning the Republican Party. Trump is doing the same thing. Trump has blown up and destroyed most of President Biden's green initiatives. He's done away with the incentives to buy electric vehicles. He killed the program that was going to build 100,000 charging stations across the country. He's increased and renewed subsidies for coal and ended subsidies for solar and wind. He's blocked the construction of windmills around the country. I mean, you know, he's doing exactly the same thing Reagan did, which is sucking up to the fossil fuel industry at the same time that we're, you know, in Iran and having basically a war for oil. None of this would be necessary. None of this would have happened, frankly, if Ronald Reagan hadn't committed treason in 1980, or at least his campaign. Bill Casey actually was his campaign manager at the time. Reagan made him CIA director. And later, as Barbara Honegger documents in her book, October Surprise, Bill Casey told his attorney, Milton Gould, that when he was supposed to testify before Congress, you know, and he told his lawyer he was going to testify, he was going to tell him the whole story of the October Surprise. And that morning that he was supposed to testify that afternoon. That morning he had a seizure and was at his desk and was taken to Walter Reed, where they removed the part of his brain that controls speech. They cut out his tongue functionally. So, I mean, you know, this is the guy who cut the deal. He never told the story. But now we've got it from Ben Barnes, you know, the former lieutenant governor of the state of Texas. So, you know, as a result of Reagan's embrace of the hard-right mullahs, they came to power. The moderates were pushed out of Iran. And, you know, we now have this mess that Trump has created with his unprovoked illegal war against Iran now. Wild stuff.